Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We're just going to look at some satellite imagery to get started off with this morning here. You can see the sun rising across the United States, and what's been left after what was a pretty soggy Sunday coming across North Carolina is the tail end of a cold front. Now behind this, there's a lot of dry air. In fact, we call this large area riding through here a dry cell. Now this is a big one, but the flow is coming over a big ridge in the west and then diving into this area. And the reality is it goes very fast. The flow goes fast over a ridge and slow through a trough. So you get a lot of convergent flow in this area, which is going to start to dry things out. And that's going to be the mainstay of our of our weekly pattern. It's going to get cold and dry until the pattern changes by the very end of the week. But that pattern change isn't going to affect us really until we get into this upcoming weekend and beyond. So let's take a look at the weekend rainfalls we just experienced. Now this was through 9 a.m. I know that there was still rain moving through parts of North Carolina after this, but this is what we have in terms of total weekend accumulated precipitation. And what's important about this map is just to kind of look at who's recently had a little bit of rain. It's kind of fallen along the frontal boundary here, linked up with an upper level low that kind of moved over Texas today. But much of the plains, the Midwest, even in parts of New England have been very, very dry. The Southeast has been quite dry. And so we just need to keep watching these keep watching these events as they come through to see if they can add some rain before things really just dry out. Now, on the temperature side of this, so far October has been a very cold month. You can actually see some of the climate reporting districts in the north central part of North Carolina getting over to the Appalachian Mountains are having a top 10 coldest Octobers on record, and the cold air that's coming through soon is going to continue to take these stats down. We've got to take a close look at that. We do have the risk for frost this week, and I want to show you a couple of interesting graphics. The first one is this one. I just pulled this off for Raleigh, North Carolina. It's just to show how cold we went compared to normal here over the last 30 days or so. That was after having a decently warm summer. Remember we had that really cold spell there at the beginning of August, but this is the one we need to be keeping an eye out on because some of our crops really needed quite a bit of time to finish. And the other problem is this. Now this is a GDD graphic, but I'm more interested in the blue bars you see over here because this represents the normal first frost dates, which the climatological average is somewhere around the 7th or the 8th, which would be about right here. Sorry, that wasn't a very clean line at all, was it? Somewhere right in there. And here we are today, and the issue is that we could be seeing our first frost about 10 days before normal. In fact, a little more than that, maybe 10 to 15 days before normal. So this is going to be a major discussion point here in a few moments. On the broader scale, I do want to show you that over the last 30 days, much of the central part of the United States has been very dry, and even some of the recent rains that have tried to come through here haven't really been corrective on the longer-term drought issues. You can see that most of the Mississippi watershed still has extremely dry soils around it, and some of the major news stories across the country lately have been how the Mississippi is so very low in many places. I pulled off some data from Memphis. I included this in my morning report for those who get it. We're about 10 feet below normal right now, below the low stage. Let me rephrase that, 10 feet below the low stage. And as a consequence here, we're 15 feet below the low stage. I was reading my scale here wrong. And this is just reflective of the overall problem we're having with these very dry conditions in the midsection of the country. Now, I will be discussing in a few moments a pattern change that will come through and start to deliver rain through here. But it takes a long time for that water to trickle through the watershed, get into the Mississippi through all of its tributaries to increase these water levels, meaning the issues you've been hearing about barge traffic will likely continue through the remainder of October into early November. What is interesting is with the cold air that's wrapping around this deep upper level low, we've got frost advisories. In fact, let's get an update on this. There we go. We've got, these are all freeze warnings, and these are all freeze watches in this shade right here, including what we've got over North Carolina. You can almost see that it makes it, to Raleigh, and that's why we were concerned about the cold air. The source of that cold air is in this blocked up pattern. Okay, so deep trough, Gulf of Alaska, big ridge sitting here. And we did have this high over a low, but it started to break down. So there's some sense of a circulation like that. That's called a Rex block. It's hard to get rid of those. This has been the trough around the Great Lakes. It brought some snow to the Great Lakes this weekend. And it's that trough in which the really cold air is going to be sitting through at least Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So this is kind of the map that I really wanted to spend some time talking about. You're looking at frost potential. So everywhere that I've shaded in gray has the chance at touching 32 degrees Fahrenheit or below. All right. Now, will we likely see a frost event get all the way to the coast? No, but this is just a map that I create from the National Digital Forecast Database data, and it just suggests that we're going to get some overnight lows here that are down there in the low 30s, below 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And that what ends up happening is when you get below 35, you have patchy frost that shows up in areas. So we better go in and take a look at what the actual low temperatures are forecast to be. Now remember, this map will evolve every day. It comes from the National Weather Service. This map is data driven by the forecast models, and then it is also worked over, if you will. It's altered by the National Weather Service meteorologists. So we were warm this morning. Excuse me. I was cool this morning. You guys were warm this morning compared to normal. But here comes the colder air for Tuesday morning. And this is Wednesday morning. So that's the morning I'm most concerned about. This Wednesday morning, we could have temperatures that touch frost all the way down to the Gulf Coast, but it's certainly a deep area of cold air here. This is what things look like on Thursday. It's very similar, all right? But temperatures really start to moderate quickly after that. There's Friday's lows getting into Saturday and Sunday, all right? You can see the big warm up in the midsection of the country. That is all a part of a bigger pattern change. So now we're going to look at high temperatures, and the anomalies are shaded. So this is today on Monday, getting into Tuesday. Look at that, Raleigh, 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Wednesday, 54. Thursday, 56. And then the warm up happens for the weekend. There's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, you can see a substantial shift in the pattern, right? Where we once had quite a bit of warm air for most of October. In fact, did you see that? So far in the month of October, these climate reporting districts here are all reporting a top 1, 2, 3 warmest such starts to October on record. And now we're going to be dropping those temperatures off in a big way. So what's happening is this. We're watching here over the next few days this very interesting setup in the polar branch of the Pacific jet stream. That's the piece that's way up here. And we're going to be watching coming through the Bering Sea and into the Gulf of Alaska some sharp and fast troughs. And they're going to get rid of this big ridge over the west and the deep trough over the east. So by next Tuesday, the whole pattern is now flipped. Can you see that? And it's going to start this flip on Friday. So to show you what that does, okay, here's overnight precipitation we saw. There's this morning, and it's out. Now, I'm going to play this quickly because you're just going to see this low spin-off, high pressure building. Ready? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It'll be Saturday that I'll start to watch the next system right here. There's a low and upper level cutoff low that's starting to form in place here. And it could start to draw some moisture up and around and possibly bring that into the Carolinas. But I went through the rest of the week quickly because all you're going to be seeing is your temperatures bottom out, then warm back up. And the next big change is over here. It's this trough. So while you're watching a cutoff low here, the rest of the country is going to be keeping an eye here because that's the one that's going to really change the pattern up. So could we see some weekend precip in the day on Saturday into Sunday morning? Yeah, possibly some heavy rainfall coming through here. I don't yet have a total on this. I'm not really reliant on the model getting it right on the exact position of this low. For example, if it takes it farther out to open ocean, we don't get anything. If it pulls more into the Carolinas, you could see the rainfall totals that are currently being forecast double, okay? So what we end up getting here is we just play this through early next week, and this will be the first of 2 large fronts that come through the United States. And as they move over toward the east, we could have to be on the lookout here for some stronger storms. You'll say, well, wait a minute, I don't see the model putting out storms yet. And that's a weakness of these forecast models. I mean, they're still amazing, but to be able to predict out, this is 9 days out in advance or 8 days out in advance exactly what to expect. It's just challenging. So we're looking at the bigger features here. And then here's the second one coming through the midsection of the country. That's going to put rain down in the midsection of the country, send things over to wetter than normal. So we're going to watch that into week 2. But let's take a quick look at this. About the only precipitation event after today is that low that's going to curl up just like this. And that is all the way next weekend. Drier until then. Then the pattern changes. It dives in like this and ejects. And that's where we're seeing drier signal here in the near term, but don't expect it to stay overly dry. We're going to get these fronts coming through, and they could initiate some storms. Watch the temperatures respond. We've already looked at the individual days, but let's look at a 5-day sliding window. So there's the cold air trying to exit at the end of this week. Now watch. Warmth builds back in. Unfortunately, it will likely be after a frost event. And as the pattern readjusts itself, we're looking at something more like this. Southeast ridging is a possibility. Get the flow going in this direction, things really open up and start moving. Now let's get longer term. All right. This is the new outlook for November, and I'm waiting on the CPC to update their guidance and a couple of other things. But overall, you'll notice that from Texas through the mid-Atlantic, there's kind of a drier signal there, right? Whereas the West, the central United States, parts of the Midwest are looking wetter. Now, we've, of course, understand that La Nina still has a control on the pattern. It's still influencing these models. So when you look out there and you say, well, what does that mean? Well, historically, when there's a La Nina, the warmer colors represent drier conditions and the bluer colors represent wetter. You can already see that signal. It's even dry over here in the southwest as well. But much of the rest of the country, the signal's too weak, or it's actually quite strong in the northwest with being wetter than normal. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to understand, is La Nina going to be the main player? And what's La Nina doing to the MJO? What do we see in terms of other factors? So here it is. This is the current position and strength of the La Nina. And that's a lot of cold water. And remember, the cold water is the symptom. The cause is the strong trade winds in this area. And those trade winds just continue. I show you these all the time, right? The blue-green's what we're looking for here. What's interesting is that we see a bit of a shift where the blue-green meets the red. And the red is the westerly winds, and the blue-green are the easterly winds. And you see that shift, in other words, where I just drew that line, kind of sits over phase 6 and 7. Now, that means the MJO is going to sit somewhere in there as well. And it's going to be there for a while. And we know something about this phase in the month of November. If there's a La Nina, negative INSO, and the MJO is in phase 7, we tend to get troughs just sweeping through the Gulf of Alaska. Now, this is a static map, but what this means is they eventually come into the northwest and they roll across the country. This is the origin region. And if it's in phase 6, well, it's the same thing. We even get some more frequent ridging here. This is a setup, by the way, that really draws in a lot of Gulf moisture, brings fronts through the Carolinas. It makes a very active pattern across the whole of the United States. Why the drier look in this area? Well, you're kind of close to the ridge overall, and that's one of the reasons for that. But this is consistent. So you come back here and you look at this longer term pattern, say if it gets stuck in phase 6 and 7, could there be more ridging in this area? The jet stream diving and coming across the country? Sure. And the proximity to that ridge means that we could see more drier days than wet. Does not mean it will be dry. Let me be clear on that. Does not mean it will be dry. Just may have more drier days than wet. Now, the bigger picture things are, how long does the La Nina last? I'm going to bring this up in every video until it's no longer a story. And we continue to see the models forecasting that through spring next year, we're going to be looking at back to INSO neutral or even weak El Nino conditions. And we got some new data to share with you today about this. So this was just released over the weekend. It is the IRI multi-model probability forecast. So what happens here is they take the data from the NMME, which I show you guys all the time, and then they apply a statistical, almost like a statistical correction to recalibrate it. Now, what we're looking at is for the whole globe, and I'm going to show you the whole globe first because a couple things to point out. See the drought issues in southern Brazil and Argentina. See how wet things are in Australia for November, December, January. See the drought continuing in parts of Southeast Asia. For us, it's that La Nina signal, drier here, wetter in the northwest, active in the Midwest. What about December, January, February? That is a La Nina pattern to the T. Still drier in Argentina, southern Brazil. Still wetter overall for parts of Australia. We're going to watch the drought here in in China. Let's flip this over and look at the temperatures. You're going to see that we could see mild conditions south, but watch out for these major cold air intrusions. We still have yet to have a thorough discussion on what's happening with the polar vortex, which is going to be setting up here over the next 45 days. Let's flip back over to precipitation and look at January, February, March. Now that's the one where I want to zoom in on the United States. So if we do that, where is it? Oh, North America. Sorry. This is what is interesting. The models are attempting to kind of abandon the strong La Nina look. So normally a strong La Nina is flow that comes in like this and then ejects here. But you notice that through the Mid-South over toward the Appalachian Mountains, it's gone wetter. And this suggests that we could get some sense of a subtropical jet coming in here, which would be an indicator that we're losing the strong La Nina look to this pattern. And that's very reminiscent of seeing this at this point, going back toward neutral conditions. On the temperature side of this, You'll also see, let's see, flip, there we go, much more steady forecast of intrusions of cold air through the plains. How often that cold air gets over us means that we're expecting to see a very volatile temperature pattern. So let's keep an eye out on that. I showed you a couple times South America. Let's wrap up with South America because the 45-day forecast suggests that parts of Argentina, which are deep in drought, Paraguay, Uruguay, and southern Brazil, are likely going to see a continuation of their drought issues. In last week's reports, I was putting out that near Buenos Aires and over toward Cordoba, these two places were 8 to 12 inches below normal in terms of spring precipitation, so they need a lot of rain to pick up this pattern. Northern growing regions, which are the ones that plant right now very quickly, like Mato Grosso, they just released on Friday that they're 41% planted. 45% was last year. That was the fastest on record. 24% was the 5-year average. So we got quite a bit to be watching for South America's planting. But the issues are south. They are in Argentina. Let's watch that carefully too. Hey, have a good week. I will talk to you next Monday. Thanks.